for somebody when they're stopping is the head is racing. Right, the head is racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It is really common for people to be sitting in front of me or talking to me saying, my head is fried, my head is racing, I can't think straight, I'm having all sorts of thoughts. Some of them can be quite out there, some of them can be quite disturbing, some of them can be quite violent, some of them can be quite scary. The head is racing. They can be quite paranoid as well at times. You know, something like, you know, people are out to get me, people, you know, are talking about me, all that sort of stuff can go on. Right? The first thing that you have to understand about when you're trying to stop is that it's okay to say to yourself that, you know what, my thinking is off beam. It doesn't mean that you're going mad. It doesn't mean that you're crazy. It doesn't mean that they're going to, you know, the doctor's going to be talking about you going to a mental health unit. That's not what it's about. It's about understanding that, you know what, my thinking is a little bit off beam. Right? So I'll give you an example, right? Think back when you were using, right? Think back when you're using. Now, usually when you're using and it's causing difficulty, people around you are getting concerned, family, friends, stuff like that, right? Did anybody ever try to help you, right, when you were like that, yet you thought they were trying to get at you? So they offered you some help, yet you saw it as a threat. That'll show you how messed up or distorted or off beam the thinking can be at times. And it's okay to say to yourself, you know what, like I have this track history of maybe not seeing things the way they are at times because of my using, and it's usually because of the using. Now that I've stopped, there's still some of that left over. There's still a tail end of that still playing out with me. So when my head starts racing and when thoughts start getting weird, I need to be able to say to myself, hang on a second here. You know, I have a track history of seeing things not the way they are. So what can I do about this? Right, so it starts with you understanding that the thinking might be off beam and that that's okay. That's to do with the using. So once that's going on, what can I do? But one of the most important things you can do is let people know what's going on in your head. Say it out loud. Now, do that with somebody who's going to be able to tell you what they actually think in an honest way. So there's a load of supports, you know, there's a load of services listed on the website here and stuff like that. Like, I mean, you find yourself somebody that you can talk to. It can be somebody in a treatment center. It can be somebody on a drugs team. It can be a family member that you trust. It can be somebody at a recovery meeting, you know, like Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Life Ring, you know, Smart Recovery, whatever they are. But you find people that you can soundboard the thoughts in your head, right? And by soundboarding, I mean, you just throw it out there and you go, listen, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And you check it out with them, okay? That's really important because what you'll start to see then is you'll have people point out to you where your thinking is okay and where your thinking is off beam. Because remember, your thinking won't be off beam around everything, but sometimes it gets quite intense. The other thing you can do as well is you can fact check things. So you can ask yourself, if you're actually thinking something and it's quite strong, you can ask yourself the question, do I have a basis in reality to believe this? Like, is there any facts to back this one up? If you were sitting there and you're thinking, God, I can't go to town now because everybody's talking about me, you ask yourself the question, well, is that a fact? So is everybody talking about me? And realistically speaking, no, they're not. There might be one or two talking about you, but most of the time they're talking about the war in Ukraine or whatever else is going on at that moment in time. That's another way you can do it, is to fact check things. Okay. Sometimes people find it helpful to write it down. If you're the sort of person that can write stuff down, write it down, get it on a piece of paper, get it out of your head. But the big thing is to, when you're having thoughts, right, that are kind of not helpful inside your own mind, is that you let them out, that you be able to say them out loud to people and let people either help you challenge them or help you just unburden yourself of them, right? One of the things about using cocaine, because you're using an illegal drug, is, I mean, there's a tendency to be secretive. There's a tendency to not tell people exactly what's going on. You know, there's a level of kind of secrecy that you have to build up around it. So letting your guard down like that can be difficult enough. But that's why I'm saying, if you're engaged with a service or if you're engaged with somebody that you know you can trust that has kind of got your back, then that can be helpful in that situation. So that'd be the second thing. The first bit was about looking at the breathing and trying to slow down the breathing. Second bit is about, okay, try and slow down the thinking, right? Ask myself the question, do I have any facts to back up what I'm thinking? Say what you're thinking out loud to other people. What do they think of it? You know, what do you think of this, lads? This is what's going on in my head. What do you think of that? You know, and they'll tell you. And then the other thing is write it down if that's going to be helpful for you. But they will be the main ways that you will kind of like fact check or try and check out, catch yourself what's going on in your head. But the underlying thing to remember is that when you use drugs like cocaine, your thinking does become a bit twisted, distorted, off beam. Use whatever word you want. It's all the same thing. But just to understand that that's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean there's something really, really wrong with your thinking. It just means it got bent out of shape by the using. The last thing, right, in terms of what people can think about having in their back pocket to help them is something that when things become a bit too much, you kind of is your go-to thing that you know can give you a bit of a break, right? Now, what happens when you're coming off cocaine and you're trying to stop, and with the head racing and the body racing, and all that, they cause quite a lot of distress. There's also really strong urges to use some more. I mean, it's a difficult drug to put down. So it's like there's always going to be strong thoughts in your head of using, especially in stressful situations, especially situations where you're worried or you're anxious, or you're scared or stuff like that. So it's always handy to have something that you know is, okay, this is my go-to thing, that if things get a bit too difficult for me, I'm going to do this before I go and I get a bag or before I phone the dealer or whatever it is. And I would be a strong believer in what's called ice cube, right? And all you do is just get an ice cube out of your freezer, and when you're having a really distressful thought or a really uncomfortable thought, you put the ice cube in your hand and you hold it like a fist and you wait for it to melt. And what that does is that will take your mind off what's going on, right? In most cases, it does, right? You're probably watching me here going, shaking your head, going, not a chance. Try it. When you have a really uncomfortable thought, when you have a really distressing thought, when you have a really strong urge to go using, get an ice cube out of the freezer, hold it in your hand, and wait for it to melt. And in an awful lot of cases, by the time it's melted, those thoughts have gone, or if they haven't gone, they've reduced quite a lot, right? A lot of times we use drugs to kind of manage uncomfortable feelings as well. So part of what you need to be able to do when you're coming off it is you need to kind of be able to handle a bit of the rough and tumble in normal life, but you also need to know where your limits are, right? And that's why having something like an ice cube to hold in your hand, you'll use that when you get to your limit, right? The thinking and the breathing and all the body stuff, that can be slowed down. The ice cube thing is sort of the last thing that you would use when the other stuff doesn't really work or just gets a bit too intense. There's any amount of supports out there, right? And it is really, really helpful to engage with them. It's really, really helpful to understand that, like, most people don't just stop straight away. It takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of effort, and that any day that you can put a bit of distance between you and your using is a good day. Any day that you haven't been able to do that doesn't necessarily mean it's been a bad day, but it's a day that you could try to do something different the next day. And you build up and build up and build up. And as you learn more techniques and as you learn more skills and as you get over stuff, you begin to understand that it's actually doable. The big thing about being able to slow down the breathing or manage the thinking a little bit more, or even, like, you know, get rid of the really uncomfortable feeling, is like, once you get past it, the next time it happens, you have an experience in your back pocket of having done it before, of having gotten through this. And the more of those that you have, the easier it is then to manage those thoughts, those cravings when they come along. Don't be afraid to engage with help. Use the resources that are available. And it is very, very doable with support, with help, with a bit of guidance. If you need help, if you need guidance, just reach out. So they're just 3 little techniques. I hope you find them useful, and I wish you the best of luck in trying to come off the cocaine. Thanks very much.